Okay, we are going to get started. So welcome to the second installment of our EMI program. Today we're going to be talking about career preparation and career plans, and a little bit about some of the things, some of the documents you may be writing for applying for jobs in the future. And if you're in the certificate program, if you're going for the certificate, you'll come for a small group workshop. That's for those who have applied for the certificate program. You'll also come to a small group workshop sometime around the middle of the semester, where we're going to kind of actually do more in-depth workshopping about some of these writing materials like CVs, resumes, as well as other documents and such. So today we're going to talk about preparing for your academic or professional career in terms of the kinds of career paths you might want to take and some of the documents you might start working on to apply for a job in the future. And next week we start a series about teaching methods. We assume that many of you are here because many of you, not all of you, but many of you want to become teachers of some kind, professors in the future. So your academic program will prepare you for the content knowledge, but not necessarily teaching skills. And so we're going to talk about teaching skills and teaching methods starting from next week. So today we are talking about career, and we're going to start by having you think and talk about your career plans. What kind of career plans do you have in mind? And maybe you really don't know yet. Maybe some of you know. Maybe some of you dream of becoming a professor. How many of you are dreaming of becoming a professor? Well, do you know what you have to do to become a professor? Okay, it's not so easy. We'll talk about that. So first I want you to think about and maybe talk to a neighbor. I'm going to have you discuss with a neighbor because this is a way of helping you to formulate your thoughts. I'll have you talk to each other in maybe small groups or pairs for a few minutes. So I want you to think about and maybe explain to your neighbor or neighbors, what are your career plans? What kind of career plans do you have in mind? Are you pretty sure about these, or these are just things you're thinking about, playing with in your mind? Are you thinking about becoming a 강사, thinking about becoming a non-tenure track professor or a tenure track professor? Maybe you want to do a postdoctor work and then go for the academic track. Maybe some of you aren't so interested in kind of the high-pressure tenure track kind of job that involves having to do a lot of research and such. Maybe you just want to teach. Maybe you just want to teach at more of a teaching-oriented school. So we talk about research institutions, and those are kind of the top schools, you know, like Kodae and Hanyang and Seoul-Daehak, where a lot of their funding and their reputation comes from the fact that the professors produce a lot of research. So they do teaching and research. Other schools maybe that are not so well known or not so prestigious, they are mainly focused more on teaching. So more teaching-oriented schools. Sometimes you call them a liberal arts college because they're not really focusing so much on research. It doesn't mean they just do liberal arts. Of course, they have a varied curriculum and they do have sciences, but the idea is to make you a well-rounded person. So yeah, you take science and humanities and all of that, but the focus is on teaching and such. So sometimes these might be a teacher's college or a liberal arts college. And in the States, by the way, we also have two-year colleges, which I don't think are very common here. Maybe you want to teach elsewhere. So tertiary refers to college education. Primary and secondary, that would be, you know, grade school, middle, high school, or maybe you want to teach at a hagwon or other private kind of school. Maybe you want to be a researcher at a university, or a researcher somewhere else, like a government institute or a private research institute. Maybe you want to be escape the academic world and go into private industry, business, government, NGO kind of work. So I want you to maybe kind of vocalize, articulate your career ideas or goals to your neighbor, and then think about why Why are you thinking about these? What are your motivations? If you want to become a professor, do you know what you have to do? What it takes to become a professor? If not, we'll talk about that. Do you want to become some sort of a famous star professor? A kind of a famous professor in the field. Why? Why do you want to do that? And are you getting adequate preparation from your department in terms of what you need to do in order to become a professor or hit the job market, an academic job market or non-academic job market? Are you getting enough advice from your professors, from your department, from your school for this? So I want you to turn to your neighbor, maybe in pairs or in small groups of about 3 or 4 people. Talk about these, kind of explain to your neighbors your career plans or some ideas you have for your careers and why. Okay, so go ahead and turn to your neighbor and start talking for a couple of minutes. Okay, let's come back together. Are some of you thinking about becoming Kangsa? Maybe if you want to become a professor in the future, maybe first you have to become a Kangsa. Are some of you thinking about that option? It's not necessarily an easy kind of job. I know some people who've done it where they have to work at they have to commute between multiple campuses because they're working as a Kangsa, 2 or 3 or 4 different schools. It's not easy unless you're lucky enough to become a full-time Kangsa at one place. Postdoctoral work, a postdoctoral research position. Any of you thinking about that? In some fields you have to do that, and you do your PhD focusing on one area, but then you need expertise in maybe a somewhat different area. And so in many fields in sciences and also psychology, psychological research, those kinds of fields, you kind of have to do a postdoc if you want to become a professor in certain fields. Any of you interested in just becoming a non-tenure track professor or something like a research professor or non-tenure track? No? Okay, how many of you are interested in becoming a regular tenure track professor? Who wants to become a professor? Okay, some of you. Okay, so why are you interested in becoming a professor? What's your motivation?
I'm actually a doctor, so for doctors, usually the track is private clinics or the university hospitals. So in order to work in the university hospital, being a professor is the only way. So
okay.
Yeah. I found that just working at a private clinic didn't, match up to my ambition.
Okay. So you want to become a medical professor. Okay. Now keep in mind, you probably, at least if you work in Korea, you will only have 5 days of vacation a year. Did you know that?
Yeah, but most of the private clinic doctors do not have any vacation.
Really? Oh my.
That's the best.
In Europe, that would be illegal. One thing I like about Europe, I spent a year in Europe, and it's actually written to the laws. You have to have a certain amount of vacation days, and they really care about vacation. It's good for human health. Okay, now what's your motivation is mainly you don't want to go to the private clinic. You would be more comfortable, happier in the medical professorship.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and of course you have long work hours too, because I've met medical professors. Okay, another person wanted to become a professor back there. I think you raised your hand. What field and what's your motivation for becoming a professor?
Studying material science and engineering, and I just like the process of it. Teaching somebody and motivating and the contribution to that field. So I actually want to be a research professor, I think, and at the same time I want to lecture as well. So, And I also like to discuss with people, and I think I can discuss with students and listen to what they think. And that's going to be fun for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I think those are two important qualities. If you really want to become a professor, I think you really should know what you're getting into. To become a professor, especially tenure track, you need to love teaching and you need to love research. You need to love both. Because if you're going to be at a research university, one of the better universities or the more prestigious universities, the universities mainly care about getting research, and especially in fields like sciences and engineering, getting research grants, getting research money. So your hiring and renewing your contract, getting tenure depends on your research output. At the same time, practically speaking, you have to love teaching because your job depends on teaching. And sometimes there are professors who make it clear that they don't like teaching. So it's good that you like teaching and research because you need both. You need to love both if you really want to become a professor. Now, if you don't like teaching, you could get a teaching job at maybe a lower level kind of university, maybe like Shigol Daehak or something, and that's fine. Are any of you interested in actually getting being a professor at a lower level university? Something a university that's just focused on teaching. Maybe it's not very well ranked. Maybe it's in Busan or Posung or Daejeon or someplace out there, not a prestigious university, or maybe just a teacher's college or liberal arts college. Are any of you interested in that option? Because there's nothing wrong with that. Students at Shigol Dae, they deserve good professors too. They need good teachers too. Students at a liberal arts college or some university that's not well ranked, doesn't have much prestige, these are probably kids who didn't grow up maybe with the privilege or prestige that maybe you all did. Maybe they came from poor environments or they didn't have parents who really encouraged them to study. They deserve good professors too. So if you really don't care about research, but if you like teaching, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a good option. Or a junior college like in the American system. Any of you want to become teachers at maybe high school, middle school, something other than university teaching? Is anybody interested in those?
I'm interested in child English education.
Mm-hmm.
I entered the university school with my ambition of being a professor. And during the program, I realized I'm not interested in research.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just stopped my program and I started a TESOL program at Sungyeong University.
Oh.
And I just found that I'm really interested in teaching young children.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just thinking about teaching young children. So rather than just teaching them the English language without any professional knowledge or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you want to teach at maybe a grade school, primary school. Okay, and that's great. I think there are, we definitely need teachers who have expertise at a master's level and such. So you're at Sukdae TESOL? Okay, I would have recommended Hanyangdae TESOL because I used to teach there. I know I didn't teach this, but there is a course specifically in teaching young learners at Hanyangdae TESOL. But just a promotion for my former employer. And that's great. I think if you don't like research, it's good to realize that now, because if you try to become a professor and if you don't like research, or if you don't like teaching, you're not going to be very happy. You should be true to yourself and really do what you're made to do. If you're a teacher type, then become a teacher and find a job where you teach. If you're just a researcher type, find a research-oriented job as a research professor, researcher at a government institute or private institute. I mean, do what you're made to do what you enjoy. Because if you try to do something you're not made to do, you're going to be unhappy, you're going to be stressed, you're going to burn out. So be true to yourself and pick a career that's really right for you. If you don't know, try doing some research in grad school and try doing teaching. And imagine, is this something I could do 40 to 60 hours a week? Teaching or research, or doing both 40 to 60 hours a week. Professors are busy. How many of you want to go into business or industry kind of careers? Anybody interested in that? Okay, so you want to go in business or industry. What's your field? Electronic engineering. Okay, good. And so you would prefer to be work at Samsung or some company like that? That kind of work? Okay. And that's good, because in engineering and chemistry and such, a lot of people get PhDs knowing that they're going to work in private industry or companies and such. And actually those majors are geared for producing people for either academic or non-academic jobs. Maybe you're going to be an engineer for Samsung or LG or something, or Apple, or who knows. Anybody want to become a government person, government worker, maybe government, administration, NGO? Anybody interested in that? Oh, okay.
I don't know if I want to be a researcher or a teacher in a science museum. Is it an NGO?
Science museum.
It's for real.
Okay. I guess that would be kind of another kind of private field, which I don't have on my list. Yeah, it's not exactly an NGO, but it's kind of educational, but it's not like you have to research or do formal teaching. I can see that as being fun. So, for those of you who want to become professors, how many of you think that's realistic? Is it really realistic to become a professor? Do you know what you have to do to become a professor? Do you know what's involved? Okay, so let's ask these two who want to become professors. What do you have to do in order to get a professorship?
Well, first I have to finish my training.
Mm-hmm.
So get a board, and then I have to do post-training fellowship, about 3 years. And during that period, I need to have some research work. There's kind of a point I have to get a certain point, SCI papers.
Right.
And then there needs to be legacy. There needs to be.
Yeah, you have to wait for an opening. Yes.
Yeah. And from what I know, the department I want to go into has about 1 or 2 openings in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Timing is important.
Yes. So in the meantime, maybe you have to be a Kangsa or a research professor.
Well, maybe work some period in another hospital.
Oh, yes. A private hospital, yes. I've met some professors who actually did work outside in the private world before becoming professors. And that can be a good thing, because I've met people who are maybe law professors who worked for a while as a judge. I've met one law professor who worked for a while as a ship's captain, and he specializes in maritime law, that is laws regarding like oceans and ships. It's an area of international law. In such cases, those professors who have outside experience in industry or non-government or non-academic work, they often have a different perspective. They can tell the students what it's like in the real world and how to get jobs out there in the real world. And they maybe have networks and connections and information and experience that can be very beneficial to their students. Okay, so you want to become an engineering professor. So what's involved in becoming that engineer professor?
I should be successful.
Successful?
I'm not sure. I'm not perfectly sure what they will look for on a professor. I'm sure when I apply to it. But currently, I think Korea University. If I look at the things what professors done and did before, I think they wrote good journals
Yes. Yeah, so it's actually pretty competitive. For those of you who want to become professors, there are, for PhDs in general, there are professorships out there for maybe 25 to 50% of you. In the sciences and engineering and such, about half of the PhDs go into industry and business and such. So there's not such a glut. And so for those remaining, the other 50%, maybe some of them can get professorships, and the rest of them will probably at some point have to give up and say, okay, I'll just apply at Samsung or do something else. In humanities, it's worse because a lot of humanities graduate students dream of becoming a professor, and they think that there's an academic job out there waiting for me, and there isn't. There are so many humanities PhDs who want to become professors that there's a surplus, a big surplus. Whether it's Korea or America or anywhere else, there are academic jobs for about 25% of humanities PhDs. So you have to be really, really good if you want to get a professorship in the humanities. Highly motivated, very much productive and in research and able to put out a lot of research and enjoy research as well as teaching. So it's really difficult in humanities because a lot of humanities grad students don't realize there aren't that many academic jobs for them. And the problem is, and to some degree in social sciences too. By social sciences I mean what internationally we consider social sciences: sociology, linguistics, psychology, political science, economics, and such. Somewhat similar situation. A lot of people go in thinking I'll be a professor, and a lot of the professors assume they're training you to become a professor, and a lot of the departments have this expectation that all of their grad students are supposed to get academic jobs, when that's not realistic. When there are academic jobs for maybe a quarter of them, a quarter of the grad students. And so part of the problem is with departments, and humanities departments and maybe social science departments, giving their graduate students this false expectations: hey, get a PhD from us, you'll be ready to get that professor job down the road, when that's not a realistic expectation. And so because of the surplus, many PhD holders end up doing the Kangsa thing year after year after year, desperately trying to, get that PhD job when there's not one available. So if you're in humanities and maybe social science, you might have to seriously consider, do you really, really want to do that? Are you devoted enough to teaching and research and maybe spending 5 years or more as a Kangsa before you can get that professorship? Because it's really hard, especially in Korea. He mentioned publishing papers. If you want to become a professor, a tenure-track professor at a better university, it depends on getting publications too in academic journals. And it's pretty competitive, especially in Korea. In general, in America, in East Asia, it's competitive now because of the economy and cutbacks in education, but especially in Korea. In America, they kind of look more at the quality of your publications. Here in Korea, they are concerned with the quantity of publications. And so you want to start thinking about getting publications out if you want to become a professor. And so you kind of have like the top level or top tier, which is SCI. So that's the Science Citation Index for those in science and engineering and medical fields, the Science Citation Index, or in social sciences, the SSCI Citation Index, humanities, the ANHCI, the Arts and Humanities Citation Index. So basically these are kind of indexes of the best journals, the best international journals. And these are hard to get into. This is probably not where you want to start publishing because, well, here is, this is one SSCI journal. It's called Tesla Quarterly. It has to do with applied linguistics and teaching English as a second or other language. They will reject about 70 or 80% of articles submitted to them, and that's not unusual. Plus, one of the better international journals, it might take 1 year or 2 years for your article to actually get printed. Because you submit the article, people review it, and they take along, these are maybe other professors somewhere who review your article, give you feedback. It takes them a long time, and they say you need to make these changes. So you make the changes, and you send it back, and you wait a long time, and maybe, okay, here's a few more changes. And the whole process can take, from the time you first send it to them to the time it actually comes out, it could take 2 years. For the best international journals, especially in psychology, it takes a long time. So you may not want to start aiming for these yet, because maybe you're still a new researcher in training. There's kind of a second level, which are other indices, other entities that index journals and abstracts. There's Scopus, there's MLA, the Modern Language Association, there's some others which you might check into. But probably the best place to start if you're really new. First thing is to start doing academic conferences, presenting some of your research at academic conferences, and then write it up and try to get some of your initial research, your master's level research, or some of your first conference presentations, that research published in what's called KCI, or Korean Citation Index journals. And here's an example of a KCI journal. This is a domestic or Korean journal. It's published in Korea, mainly for Korean linguists and educators, which is one of my fields. Once you've got some stuff in the KCI, then you start aiming for the second tier, the second level, and eventually get into the SSCI, SCI, ANHCI. This will depend on your department, your field, but generally, if you want to get an academic job here, you're going to need at least the equivalent of 5 KCI publications and or 1 international publication at least. And for every year since you finished your PhD, if you've been out of your PhD for 5 years, you need at least 5 of these on your CV to even be considered for professorship, and probably more. Maybe one of these top-level publications is maybe worth about 3 or 4 or 5 of these things. And you may want to talk to people in your field and say, okay, in order to get hired as a first-time professor, how much do I need to have? How many publications? Because it could be at least 5, maybe 10 KCI publications, or the equivalent being maybe at least 2 or 3 publications in international journals. And in the humanities, it's more competitive. Some of you back there are looking worried now because it's very competitive. You have to have a lot of good publications out. And again, this is really hard. It takes time, you know, especially if you're working as a full-time Kangsa, you're really busy, you don't have time, you know, you get home in the evening and you're just exhausted and you don't feel like writing. It's really hard to do. So it's best to start while you're in graduate school, getting some of this out and build up your CV. So, and then like I said, be true to yourself. Try to find really what you want to do and do it. Because if you don't like teaching and you have to teach, you're going to hate it. You're going to burn yourself out, and the students will realize you don't like teaching. I read a book by an education professor, or he's a person in science education, and he talks about when he was an undergraduate student at some university in California. He was excited because he was going to have a science professor who had won a Nobel Prize. So he's really excited to be taught, to learn from a scientist, a science professor who had won a Nobel Prize. But he was very disappointed because this scientist didn't care about teaching, and he made it obvious. Imagine if you're taking an undergraduate physics course, and I'm your teacher, and let's say I come in and basically I make it clear to you, I think you kids are a bunch of parasites. I want to be in the lab, I want to be doing new discoveries. You kids are taking my time. Okay, I'll just... the professor kind of communicated that idea very clearly to them. I don't want to be here in the classroom. I want to be in my lab. You kids are just sucking up my time. So if you do that to your kids, well, if you're a student in that class, would you want to continue majoring in physics? Probably not. So you don't want to ruin the motivation of your students and ruin your own motivation. And last week I talked about, well, 2 weeks ago, I talked about motivation. So examine your motivation. Do you want to become a star professor or just really successful, whether it's industry or government, business or academia, because of someone's expectations? Is it because of someone's expectations about yourself, your family's expectations? Is it cultural or social expectations that are determining your career choices? Have you kind of internalized expectations, or kind of maybe because you're a perfectionist and you think, okay, if I'm really worthy and good, I should be able to become a star professor or a star researcher or a star engineer? Are you doing this really because it's what you want to do, or is it because of some unrealistic expectations you have made for yourself and you think, okay, I have to do this in order to be successful, I have to do this and be this good if I really will accept myself or love myself, or think that people will accept me or my family will be proud of me, and if I don't, my family won't be proud of me, or my friends won't be so proud of me because my friends are becoming professors, my friends are getting jobs at Samsung and LG and top businesses and such. So think about, why are you doing this? Is it perfectionism? Is it motivation that's not realistic? Is it someone else's expectations you're trying to meet? So like I say, be true to yourself. Find what you really enjoy and do that. If you're not doing what you really enjoy, you're not going to be happy. You're going to make maybe students unhappy. You're going to make yourself unhappy. You're going to burn out. And eventually you're going to make yourself depressed. Or you're going to fall into procrastination because you're trying to avoid things that you really don't enjoy doing. So those are some important considerations for thinking about your career choice. What do you want to do and why do you want to do it? And that's why I put motivations on here. So hopefully by the time you're defending your dissertation, finishing your PhD, hopefully by then you'll have a better idea of what you want to do and why. Then you need to start hitting the job market and start preparing your job application materials. And that's the next part of our session. Job application materials and job search materials. So what kind of materials do you have to prepare? But it kind of helps. It might help you find job opportunities someday. But what kinds of documents do you need to prepare for the job search? A CV, okay, a CV or a resume. So what's the difference between a CV and a resume? We have CV and a resume. Now, by itself, that looks like the verb resume. Resume is from French, and we put at least one French accent mark on it. Although more formally, to be really formal, and keep this in mind if you're writing a resume, you want to be really formal, it has two French accent marks. It's from French résumé in French. You all know French? It's helpful. Résumé or resume. So formally, it has both accent marks. Or at least the final accent mark. Or you've got CVs, which is Latin. So you have to. So like I think I said before, if you really want to become good in English, you need to learn the other languages that contributed the vocabulary to English. So you need to study Latin, Greek, French, Spanish, and German. Right? CV is Latin, curriculum vitae, or sometimes for short, vita. It's kind of an abbreviation. This means course of one's life. That's what it literally means in Latin, course of one's life. Or vita simply means life, and in Latin the AE makes it possessive of. So it's basically an academic bio, an academic biography. What's the difference between a resume and a CV? When do you use a resume? When do you use a CV?
When I want to get a job in university, maybe I will need CV. Resume.
Okay. Okay, so a resume is a simple one-page document for applying for a business or company. And if you're applying for a university job, an academic job, a research job, you're going to use a CV. CVs are sometimes used for other things in academia as well. If you're applying for a job in business or industry, maybe government, usually use a resume. How long is a resume? It's one page, just one page. Unless you've been working for a long time and you've got a lot of experience, a lot of company, business, corporate, industry experience, and you're applying for management, mid-level, upper-level management, or executive positions, then you could have a two-page resume. But for most of you, when you start, you're going to use a one-page resume if you're applying for non-academic jobs. Academic jobs use a CV. And how long can a CV be?
At least 3 pages.
It can be 3. If you've got a lot of research, you've done a lot of stuff, it can go on forever. There's no limit on how long a CV can be. One time I went to the website of a famous linguist at Georgetown University. Her name is Deborah Tannen. She's famous for work in gender and communication issues. And she's written a lot of academic books and a lot of non-academic popular books and articles, and she's been on TV shows and such. And so she has so many things on her CV. Her CV really is like a kilometer long. She actually had to break it up because she's so productive. And you won't be like Deborah Tannen, but you're going to want to have probably a CV of at least 2 pages or more, depending on how much you've done. Well, let's start with the resume. What do you put in a resume?
Name.
Okay, name, basic information. What else? Okay, so maybe like awards that can include scholarships. What else?
The experience? The previous experience?
Okay, work experience. Okay, so regular jobs that you've held. Now, research experience. Okay, academic background. Probably on a company resume, you might not have room for research experience. However, you're going to put your education, you're going to put your actual employment experience. If you have room, maybe you could put research experience, although more often that's something you put on a CV. So a resume can be somewhat flexible. You can put awards that can include various honors, awards, scholarships. Since college, you don't put high school stuff. At least in Western resumes, we don't put like what high school you graduated from. Your history starting from college years. So let me see. I have actually online a resume guide, and let me see, where is it? Yeah, so this is something like a resume. I've got some contact info. You want that. For the title of a resume, it's probably often going to be your name in big letters like that. There's no one format. You can go online and you can find a number of different examples of good resumes, examples of bad resumes also online. As long as it looks professional and it looks readable. But usually you have your education first and then your work experience. In the formatting, again, there are different ways of doing formatting. You can look online for examples. But here I've used a little bit of boldface, not too much text decoration. Some people like to use a lot of text decoration, like bold, italics, capital letters, big letters, like for the headings, like education and experience. Don't overdo the text decoration. It should be kind of more subtle, like this. I don't need like education in 15-point, bold, all capital, italics, double underlined font. That's overkill. That's, don't overdo the decoration. It should be simple and professional looking. It's in reverse chronological order, starting from the most recent, going back. And so I've got my work experience, awards and professional activities, or awards, or some people oftentimes have other skills. Especially if you don't have much work experience, you can have other skills or other qualifications or other things like that. And this could be if you've done a significant amount of volunteer work, work in some kind of organization, NGO, part-time work, tutoring maybe if you're really desperate for something to put on there. Other qualifications, maybe you got a certificate, some training certification, a license, whatever. If you take a TESOL program, for example, you get a TESOL certificate. It's not a degree, but it's a certificate. You know, any kind of certification, qualifications. For guys, maybe your military experience is something you might put because you're wanting to account for any gaps and such. So those are some of the basic things in a resume, and you can go online and get my resume guide, which explains more about the kinds of content you put in a resume, the format, fonts that you can use, and how to make it look pretty. You can go online and find a number of other examples of how people have done the formatting somewhat differently, as long as it looks nice. Now, when I was in college, we actually used hard copy resumes. We actually printed things out and mailed them. So you had to print them out on very nice quality paper, or fancy paper. Fortunately, nowadays, mostly this is electronic and you just email the PDF, which is, I'm glad we do that. That's easier. So those are some of the things you put on a resume. For your college degrees, undergraduate degrees, you're going to put university, major and minor, probably, your GPA. If it's an undergraduate degree, we usually put your GPA. For example, where is it? 3.9 out of 4. Different schools use different scales, so here I put 3.9 out of 4 or 4.0. You indicate what kind of scale it is. For graduate degrees, you don't put GPA because GPA is not important for graduate degrees, especially on a CV. Work experience, be sure to have enough information about, and for graduate degrees, you might put your advisor and other things. Work experience, put the dates. Some people like to put the dates in a column here, which is very readable, and you'll see that on my CV sample. You need to have enough information about the location of these places. You know, don't just put Samsung. I mean, what Samsung? Where? Because there are a lot of different Samsung branches. Is it Samsung Hospital, Samsung Microelectronics, Samsung, which branch or division where? Was it Suwon? Was it where? Enough information about the location of your workplace. Everybody knows where University of Illinois is, but if you worked at a company, you need to put at least the city and the state or country and things like that, where it was, so that they can check on you and verify your work history, because they might do that. They might want to be able to contact your past employers and at least verify, yes, you really worked there. So the information should be complete enough that it is useful for somebody to judge you. Now, resumes, like I said, are one page. If you have worked for a long time and you're applying for management positions, executive positions, there could be other things. There could be sections for accomplishments, sections for particular projects you worked on, things like that in your company, responsibilities. When you have work experience, at least a brief summary of your main responsibilities or accomplishments. So here are these bullets to do that kind of neatly. These are basically my main job responsibilities that are indicated here, also on a CV. You would probably do that very briefly. You don't need a long list because a resume needs to be short and concise. Now, CVs. What other things do you put on a CV? I've got a CV sample. You might have seen it online. I'm going to correct this. I need to correct this, so go back and get the corrected version later. I've got my picture here. For CVs and resumes, do you put photos? If you're applying to an international or Western company, or if you're applying to a university in another country, do you use photos on your resume or CV? No. In Korea, you do. What about China? Do you put photos on Chinese CVs and resumes?
Yes.
You just, okay. It's more of an East Asian thing. Outside of East Asia, we don't want personal stuff on CVs and resumes, like a photo. Why? So Western companies, Western universities, they don't want that on a CV or resume. Why? There's a potential for discrimination. Either they might, at least unconsciously, discriminate, or they don't want to be in a position where they could be accused of discrimination. Like, okay, they rejected that person because it was obvious that he looked fat and plain looking in his picture, or the person was hired because they were so beautiful looking, or because they were hired or not hired because they were black or Asian or something, or male or female. So in Western resumes and CVs, or international resumes and CVs, no photos, no other personal information, marital status, age, things like that, you don't put on there. And of course, anywhere on any CV or resume, you don't want, like in your background, you don't want to put anything that describes specific political or religious orientations. So if you're doing a resume and you don't have much work experience and you're trying to put maybe what you did as an undergraduate, you were involved in campus activities, don't list the fact that you were president of the Kim Jong-un fan club, or you're a member of this religious organization, because the same problem, discrimination. They might discriminate against people of certain political or religious persuasions, or they might feel like they're going to be in trouble because if we hire or don't hire this person, it's kind of problematic because they put religious information or political information on their application materials, and that's kind of a legally tricky situation for them. So, CVs. So the kinds of categories we saw in resumes, those can go on CVs, of course. You have to have your education history, work history. You can put honors, awards, other skills. What else goes in a CV? That's probably more like the statement of purpose, your self-introduction. Okay, and we'll talk about SOPs briefly in a minute. I have cute ringtones. Okay, what else goes in the CV? What other kinds of information? Scholarships that you've won?
Yes, awards.
Awards? Yes, so you can put awards. And the titles you can adjust to your own liking. You can call it awards, or if you've gotten a bunch of scholarships, just scholarships, maybe. What else? Okay, so you can that can be a special, if you've got a lot of volunteer experience, that can be a separate section, or you can call it other skills, other qualifications, other activities, whatever. You can tailor this according to your needs and how you categorize things. That's something that can go on there. What else? Publications, definitely. So if you're applying for an academic job, you have to have probably publications and also conference presentations. And you might use a CV for applying for a research position, for a professorship, for a Kangsa position, or even if you're a master's student applying for a PhD program somewhere else, they might expect a CV also. And at least maybe as a master's student, maybe you don't have much, but at least a couple of conference presentations would look nice. Again, the more of this stuff you have, the better for your employment chances. I've got plenty of contact info. I'm bragging about all my online presence here, by the way. If you've got a website, at least, and your email. Okay, so there's my education, my experience. I need to correct this. Research interests, I've got my research interest. You could do this either at the beginning. I need to correct this. I've got this in two places. Either at the beginning here or here with my publications. Okay. I've spelled out my research areas. I need to fix that. Publications. Oh, this is old. Something happened with this. There's something wrong with my file. This is old. Publications. Works under review. So if you have submitted things and they have not been published yet, maybe they are in press, maybe they have been accepted but they are still in press, you could put that with your regular publications and say in press with the year. Maybe you've submitted publications to journals but they haven't yet accepted it. Maybe they're still looking at it. Or maybe you're still in the process of revising it and it hasn't actually officially been accepted and gone to print yet. So it's better to put that in a separate section and call it works under review. And here I've got a couple of non-academic publications, commercial stuff. Then I've got conferences and presentations, conference presentations actually. Now, how to format this? Okay, so in your field, when you write academic papers, you follow a certain citation system. If you're in education or social sciences, you probably use the APA system when you write academic papers. And if that's the case, if your field, like linguistics, education, psychology, uses APA for writing academic papers, then on your CV, you probably want to follow APA format when you list your publications and also when you list conferences that you've done, your conference presentations. There is in APA a way of doing writing up your conference presentations. If you are in literature, your field probably uses the MLA system. If you're in engineering, you probably use IEEE citation system. Whatever the citation system, the referencing system is used in your field, you're going to follow that on your CV. And so your publications and your conference presentations are going to be listed according to the style that's used in your field. It's the same way that, you know, in an academic journal, the references appear at the end of an article in an academic journal. The way it's done in your field, you're going to follow that on your CV. And so if you don't know, you need to find out what system is used in your field. Medicine, do you use Vancouver style in your field, or do you know?
I'm not sure, but yeah.
So you probably want to find out. It may be Vancouver style, because I know that's used in nursing and some health sciences. Engineers often use IEEE, physicists use APS, chemists use ACS, biologists often use CBE. Humanities other than literature like history tend to use Chicago style. And again, a lot of social sciences use APA style, and there are a number of other styles. So you want to find out what's used in your field, get to know it, because you need to know it in order to write academic papers, and two, to write up your CV. Other things that can go on a CV, it really depends on you and your field and what you have to brag about. Now in my case, because I'm in the education field, I put pedagogical experience, my teaching experience. This is more unique to my field because I'm in the education field. So I've listed a lot of detail about courses that I've taught and other kinds of workshops, seminar series, like this one, that I can brag about. What else? Materials development. Honors awards, professional activities, if you're a member of the American Psychological Society, whatever. Other skills and experience. Again, there are different ways you can do this. This is how I've done it. I've listed computer, linguistic skills, etc. References. Okay, on a resume, you don't put references. If they want references, if they are interested in you, they will contact you and say, okay, could you send us some references? You don't really want to waste space on a resume. In the past, at the bottom of resumes, we used to put references available upon request. That was just such a formality. Nowadays, people say you don't really need to do that. if a company wants to know more about you, they will contact you and ask you for an interview and for references. But on a CV, you want to list your references, at least 3 people, 3 professional or academic people, professors, previous employers, supervisors who know you well enough, who've known you for at least a year, who could say something good about you. So if the university, if the university is interested in you, they will actually contact them. So there have been times when I've applied for jobs and they actually phoned my references. These people, well, these are fake references because it's not public, but they've actually done that. In my case, when I've applied for jobs, they've actually emailed or phoned them. So you put that on references. By the way, on resumes, I don't have anything here. For beginning level resumes, in the past people used to list their objectives at the beginning, and also on CVs. You don't necessarily have to do that, but in the past it was kind of common to put objectives and some very general statement like entry-level position at a electronics company. Often those were such general statements they were kind of meaningless. So on a resume or CV, you don't have to put an objective statement unless you're applying for a specific job. When I was in graduate school and I applied for assistantship positions, teaching assistantships in the American system, I might put objective teaching a section of Intro to Educational Psychology. If it's something specific, that's okay. But otherwise, you don't have to put an objective statement unless you want to specify a position. Maybe if you're applying for a company and you are applying for Samsung, you want to say objective, entry-level position in the microelectronics division, semiconductor, gallium arsenide semiconductor division, or something specific like that. Otherwise, you don't need it. We're doing on time. Okay, so any questions about CVs or resumes? Okay, if you are doing the certificate program around middle of the semester, we'll have a workshop where we will, I'll make you bring sample or draft resumes, CVs, and other materials, and we will actually work on it, workshop it together. I will put up a revised version of my CV. Now, other things, cover letters. I don't have much time to talk about cover letters, but we'll probably do so in a workshop. I've got, on my website, I've got a guide booklets on writing CVs, resumes, SOPs. Cover letters. When you apply for a company or academic job, you often put a cover letter. Because in the old days, we would mail hard copies and you put a resume and then on top of it, the cover letter like this. What do you put in a cover letter? Has anyone ever written a cover letter to apply for a job? Okay. Well, basically, if you blow this up, you've got your, well, that's your contact info here, the date, the person that you're writing to. It might say Professor so-and-so or in search committee members if this is an academic job, or search committee members, or if you know it's Professor Smith. If you don't know, you can just put to whom it may concern, especially for a company job. And you say, I'm writing to apply for such and such position, and you often say where it's advertised. They like to know where you found out about the job. It was maybe a certain job website, an academic job website, or you found out from somebody at a conference that there was this opening, or you met the PR person who came to your university to advertise for jobs, whatever. And it's kind of a brief statement of your interests and a brief statement of why you're interested in working for this company or this university. And this kind of shows that you know something about the place you're applying to. And that usually looks good if you at least show some knowledge of the company. I'm interested in applying for a job at your company because I like the work that your company is doing in research on nanotube transistors, and I want to get into that. It shows that you know something about the company and they like that. Rather than, I'm great, you should hire me. No. Be focused on the needs of the potential employer. Then you kind of try to sell yourself by explaining your academic, intellectual background and experience, highlighting your strengths. So this is stuff that's not necessarily in the resume or CV, but kind of your personal strengths, academic strengths, research strengths, or character strengths that would make you attractive and interesting to this company or to this school. So you're basically saying, this is the kind of person I am, this is why I would contribute to your company. And again, it's not about how great I am, but it's more so, this is the kind of person I am in my accomplishments and in terms of how I could contribute, how I might be a good employee at your company, or how I could be a good professor and researcher at your university. So the way you write it, it should be tailored to and worded with the needs and interests of the company in mind, or the school in mind. So here I have, usually it's 1 or 2 body paragraphs where you're basically selling yourself, but not bragging, but basically saying how you could be a valuable member or asset to the company or to the university. And I've got a couple of samples on the website, so do look at those, and there are many other examples online. This is a bit long, by the way, but sometimes for applying for professorships it's a little long like this. Then you probably want to conclude, well, if you're applying for a professorship, you might say, these are the kinds of classes I can teach, and these are the things I can do. Then you conclude by basically inviting them to maybe contact you. If you prefer to be contacted by email or phone, maybe let them know. And don't ever say, hey, I'll call you. You don't want to do that. That's too pushy. Invite them to contact you. If you guys want to interview me, or we say, if you're interested in discussing things further, or if you're interested in getting to know me further, please contact me, or please phone me, or please email me. You can even put the number or email right there if it's not on your resume. And that's kind of what a cover letter looks like. I've got a few other samples on the website. We need to look briefly about SOPs, although during the mid-semester workshop for certificate applicants, we might talk about SOPs if you have SOPs. Here's my SOP, yes. Let's say you want to apply to another graduate school. You've got your master's here, maybe you want to move to another school for a PhD. You have to write an SOP, a statement of purpose. What goes in a statement of purpose? I've got a guide, a little booklet on the website that goes into more detail and gives a few examples. This is actually the SOP that I wrote to get into my PhD. I did a PhD in educational psychology, and this is my actual SOP that got me into a PhD. My goal is to obtain a PhD degree in blah, blah, blah. So you start out by saying what you're applying for, and here I've stated briefly my research interest. This is what I want to research. They probably want to know, and maybe why. In the first paragraph or second paragraph, a brief explanation of why. So you're going to maybe spell out the particular subfield. So here I'm applying for educational psychology. Big, big field. They kind of want to know what part of, what area of educational psychology. And here I said second language acquisition. Why? Well, one, they want somebody who knows what they want to do. If you don't know what you want to do, they're not going to want to take you. But second, they want to, if they accept you, they want to be able to match you with a professor who could be your advisor, or at least an initial academic advisor at the beginning. And secondly, their ability to accept you might depend. Do they have positions? Does the professor for second language acquisition, is he available to take on another grad student or another 5 graduate students who want to work under him? Do they have an opening in that area? So it helps at the beginning to spell out what you want to do, what's your subfield or your specialization. Next, what you do in an SOP is kind of like a cover letter. Just notice that it's kind of business letter style, the kind of paragraphs and single line spacing. Here I talked about my research background and interest, and I've talked about how my interest developed over time, which basically explain why I want to apply for second language acquisition at this department. And you're probably going to want to say, why are you applying to this school? In this case, I was moving from a master's degree to a PhD at the same school. If you're applying to move to a different school, you're going to want to say why. Is it because your boyfriend is there or your girlfriend is there? That's not good enough. It has to be specific. It has to show you know something about this department. And it's because I like your department because Professor so there does really interesting work in German syntax, and I want to do that too. So it's maybe because their program is strong in a certain area that you want to do. Or you know Professor Smith's work and you want to work under Professor Smith. It's helpful if you say something like that because it shows that you know what you want to do and you actually know their program, you know their department. Maybe you've read their research by their professors, you met them at a conference, or you've read their books, or whatever. It shows that you have purpose and specific ideas of what you want to do. If you are if you're going from a master's program to a PhD, they probably will expect more. You're probably going to want to identify a specific research topic that might be your dissertation, your PhD dissertation topic. Now, of course, your interest could change, but they are looking for somebody who has a very specific idea of what they want to do. So if you've got a master's degree or you're finishing a master's degree and you're applying for a PhD, they probably expect that you have a very clear idea of the kind of topic you would like to do for your PhD research. And you should maybe explain that more, maybe in the later paragraph. This is what I want to do for my PhD research, a more detailed explanation of the kind of research specialization, the research topic that you want to do. Again, they know that your interest might change some, but they're looking for a person who seems focused and mature enough, who knows the field well enough that they can articulate a potential PhD research topic or dissertation topic. Especially if you're in science or engineering, they will really expect that. Or in psychology, the more competitive fields. Finally, you're probably going to want to say, what do you want to do after your PhD? Could be a master's, but likely a PhD. What are your future plans? Because if you want to say, I want to get this education degree and do private tutoring and be a housewife. No. They're looking to invest years of training you and advising you and maybe working in their department and doing research work for them. And if you don't seem very serious about your future plans, they won't want to take you. But if you really have special plans, like after my PhD, I want to continue research in this area and work as a professor or researcher, or in some fields it's maybe okay to say I want to work in private industry and work for an engineering firm and do development of new nanotube transistors or something like that. Then you should put that, because they want to see that you have clear career plans and focus and maturity also in order to accept you. So those are some of the things you put in an SOP. So we've talked about that. And are any of you interested in applying to America for graduate school? Maybe a PhD? Because the last part of this handout has to do with that. If any of you are thinking about applying for a PhD in America, since the time I left America around 2008. I'm not sure if I want to go back. My government spies on me, probably. If you do want to apply for a PhD, especially in America, they might want to actually have you do an interview. It's a brief interview, maybe by Skype or maybe in person. There's some sample interview questions. I've also got job interview questions on the website, which are a lot more serious. But a grad school interview question is maybe kind of similar, but maybe not as intensive. So it might be something like, let's say you're applying for a PhD in America and say, okay, tell me, what research have you done so far?
Nothing yet.
Nothing, okay. Sorry. Maybe you're going to reapply in about 3 years. Okay. Let me see. What research have you done so far?
I've written a paper on myocardial infarction. Myocardial
infarction. That sounds like a cheerful topic. Heart attacks. It's a type of heart attacks. That sounds like very, okay. Then they're going to ask you maybe, what research do you want to do for your PhD?
Interventional cardiology.
Okay, interventional cardiology. Okay, and they would probably want you to explain more in detail, like what specific research you have in mind. So it's sort of like a very general version of job interview questions. They're going to ask you about your past. Why are you interested in this research area? What research have you done so far as a master's student? And then as a PhD student, what do you want to do? What research do you want to do? Why? And just like in an SOP, you're going to explain, why do you want to do this research? What's the value? What's the worth of it? What's the future potential or contribution of your research to the field? Either in terms of its contribution to our theoretical understanding or practical application, depending on your field. And once you've got your PhD or your postdoc or whatever, and you actually go interview for an academic job or a job in industry, you're going to do an interview, probably many interviews. And there are interview questions. And they might say, for example, a common starting question is, tell us about yourself. Okay, so unexpected question. That's a common question. That doesn't mean like your life history, but again, that's kind of a summary of the sort of qualifications like what you might explain in your cover letter or SOP. Who are you as maybe as a professional or academic person? Why do you want to apply for this job? That's kind of what they want when they say, tell us about yourself. That's often a starting question in a job interview. And if it's for an academic job, they're going to ask you in detail about your research and your research plans for the future. If it's a company, they're probably going to challenge you with a lot of difficult, mind-bending questions. They're going to ask you, why do you want to apply for this company? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? If they ask you, what are your weaknesses, don't say, I'm a perfectionist. Everybody says that. That's old and that's dumb. Everybody has overused that line, I'm a perfectionist. That's my weakness. Avoid that. Have honest answers about your shortcomings and your past mistakes and how you've learned from them, because they will ask you things like that in a job interview. We'll do more with job interviews in the small group workshop around mid-semester if you've applied for the certificate program. And by the way, if you want to become a professor, let's say you do get hired as a professor. Let's say you've got enough of those just to get hired. They give you maybe a 3-year contract. Then you have to do a lot more of these publications in order to get rehired. And you have to do more publications. And then maybe you get tenure after about 7 years or so. So it's a never-ending rat race, as we say. If you go to private industry, maybe that's not so difficult. Probably the job interviews for companies are probably more intense than in academia. How much time do I have? There's a lot more I could say about job interviews. I don't have enough time. On the website, I've got sample questions from regular job interviews and then also from academic job interviews. I can tell you a little bit about my experience. One time I interviewed for a Korean company. This is a long time ago. It's a private, you probably know the name. It's a big company that's headquartered in Suwon. They hire English teachers and language teachers to teach English and other languages to their employees and executives. So one time I went for an interview there. This was about 12 or 13 years ago. They asked me, okay, have you ever stuck your foot in your mouth? That's an expression meaning, have you ever said anything inappropriate or socially embarrassing? And I said, no, I don't really do that. And they said, have you ever stuck your foot in your mouth with your wife? I said, no. Now that's an inappropriate question. And even though they offered me the job, I turned them down because in the interview they were aggressive. Usually you start with an ice-breaking question like, tell us about yourself. Their interview was not like that. It was aggressive. They asked me questions like this that were not appropriate. So don't let people do that to you. If they ask you inappropriate questions, say that's not an appropriate question. It's probably a sign that it's not a good company to work for. And I'm glad that I said no when they offered me the job. Later I met people who worked for them, other teachers who were working for them, and they said the job was terrible. And so I'm glad I turned them down. So watch out for in the interview, watch out for bad signs. Academic job interviews, you might see signs of maybe rivalries between certain professors. That's something to look for in an academic job interview. You might see professors who are asking you questions that are kind of loaded, that shows that maybe they have theoretical rivalries or personal rivalries between each other or between their department and then other departments or whatever. Especially in certain fields like linguistics where people have these religious attachments to their pet theories. So those are things to watch for. If you give a job talk, often for an academic job, they have you do an academic presentation about your research and then an interview. There might also be questions from professors at your presentation, at your job talk, that indicate signs of maybe rivalries or kind of dogmatic attachments to certain theories and such, conflicts or something. So those are some things to look for if you do academic job interviews. So again, I've got a lot more stuff on job interview questions, samples on the website. And again, during the small group meeting for certificate applicants, we're going to workshop on your CVs or resumes, other application materials, and we'll also do a little practice job interviewing with some of those job interview questions. Those job interview questions are maybe things that you can rehearse. You can prepare, if you're actually applying for a job someday, you can take those sample interview questions and kind of rehearse how you might answer these. Now, some of them are kind of tricky questions, purposely so. So think about how you would answer questions about what's your greatest weakness, or something like that. Also, companies tend to give you like some kind of a brain teaser problems, like how would you solve this kind of brain teaser? Some kind of a weird problem that sounds like a problem that would be on a GRE exam. They're not looking necessarily for the correct answer, but can you articulate how you would go solving this problem, how you would set up the problem and articulate it. So they'll give you strange problem-solving questions on corporate job interviews sometimes. And so what they want to see from you is, do you know how to start tackling the problem? Can you explain to them, well, maybe I don't have the answer, but this is how I would go about trying to solve the problem and setting it up and analyzing it. Things like that. But I don't have time to go into that today. So do you have any questions? Okay, so next week we're going to shift gears, do something very different. We're going to start talking about teaching methods next week for those of you who want to become teachers or professors. So start coming next week and enjoy that.